Hello, and welcome to the Quantum Fit Podcast. I'm Taylor, and I am your host. This podcast is all about applying the different principles of quantum physics and quantum biology to your health and fitness. This gives us a holistic view of how different environmental factors, such as sunlight or cold, play a major role in your overall health. So I won't just be talking about diet or exercise and developing good habits. If you want to really make lasting changes on how you feel, think, and act, then I'd recommend you try to listen closely and have an open mind to what I have to say. Every day I'll be hitting you with a quick 7 to 15 minute long podcast. I keep it short like this because it makes it both informative and to the point so that you don't feel quite so overwhelmed with information. Also, currently I do not do any kind of advertisements. So instead, I ask that you share this podcast with a friend or family member if you enjoyed the message and gained something from it. I want to be able to spread quality and easy to understand content that everyone can take and use in their own daily lives. I would highly appreciate it. Alright, so today's episode is the quantum benefits of cold exposure. Now last week I did an episode on the biochemical benefits of cold exposure, so now I feel that it's a good time to do an episode on the quantum side of things. By the way, whenever I say quantum benefits, because I know I will in the future in different podcast episodes, I'm generally referring to anything that directly or indirectly makes mitochondria generate energy more efficiently. Or I'm talking about things that directly provide more light, aka photons, or more electrons to the body without the mitochondria altogether. Either way, these are what help us on a quantum level, and that's what, those are the things I refer to as quantum benefits. Now, moving forward, as I've said multiple times in previous podcasts, cells are made up of a special structured water that makes them semi-liquid crystal semiconductors. What's important to focus on is the semiconductor point right now. Also, of course, this means that not only the cells, but all tissues are semiconductors within the body. As far as I know, all of them are. All the major ones are anyway. And again, a semiconductor is a material that has conductivity, electrical conductivity, somewhere between a conductor and an insulator. This is important to know because these kinds of materials are well known for becoming far more efficient at conduction the colder they get. Applying this to biology means that cells, quite literally, become better at conducting both electricity and photons the deeper the cold exposure goes. Now, the other quantum benefit of cold exposure has to do with shrinking the cell. It's pretty common knowledge that the distance between water molecules grows when it's heated, but shrinks as it gets colder. At least until it freezes, then water can expand almost indefinitely. So, think of electronics for a moment. In general, they become more efficient the smaller the circuits become and the shorter the distance the electrons have to travel across. If the distance is too far or inefficient, electrons are much more easily lost as they race around the circuit. And this same sort of thing happens within the cell as well. But it's not just shrinking the cell and making electrons, have an easier time getting around that happens from the cold. The cold also makes you generate a hell of a lot more electrons, too. As your cells shrink from the cold, this means that your mitochondria must also be shrinking. And as they do, the respiratory proteins within will get pushed closer together. Now, this is important because respiratory proteins are what make up the electron chain transport. And that is the specific process that creates ATP, or otherwise you can just call it energy for the cell. So it's a major, major point to note. Now, when we're talking about moving these respiratory proteins closer together, we're talking about extremely small distances. It might even be, I think the measurement is Planck's, which is, I don't even know if you can actually measure it. It's more of a conceptual thing. Like that's how small of a distance it is. But the thing is, when you're dealing with the movement of electrons, because again, the electrons are jumping across the respiratory proteins, that's basically what happens. Well, when you're dealing with that kind of thing, just the slightest difference in distance can give you an exponential result. Suddenly you might be able to create 10 times the amount of ATP or energy because your respiratory proteins are, again, just marginally closer. You might not even be able to look at it. Even with an electron microscope, you'd probably have a hell of a time trying to see the difference in spacing. Now, both of these major benefits major quantum benefits of cold exposure are the reason that Wim Hof is able to do what he does. Marathons in the Arctic and desert, swimming under ice sheets, climbing mountains, keeping the same core temperature for hours in ice water, and doing all of it naked. It's not simply because of the biochemical boosts from cold, but rather most of it is because he's able to create way, way more ATP than the normal human can. His constant cold training over the past few decades has been increasing his capacity to generate energy as well as conduct electricity, which if you go back to my previous podcast talking about, force fields in the cells, it also means, he has a super, super ultra high immune system, because there was a test he did where they injected him with, I can't remember. I don't know if it's a virus. I think it's something that's supposed to make you, start puking and other things very shortly after they inject it in you. But all that happened is, his adrenaline levels went up and nothing happened. He just was able to fight it off super easily. It's because he had the, again, what I would call basically the force field around his cells, which is, it's extremely strong because he's able to conduct so much electricity, and the voltage in his cells is so damn high that the virus has no chance of even affecting him. So it's kind of like going from a 60s computer to a modern one. There's a lot of the same kinds of materials used, in building both, but the biggest difference when you really look at them is how many electrons are being generated and moved around. That's that's what it's like for him, comparing the 60s computer to a modern one. He's just able to generate way, way more electricity. So that's why I try to focus on the quantum benefits rather than the biochemical benefits, because I feel that, the biochemical benefits can only go so far, but the quantum ones, you can kind of just keep going and going and going, and it keeps building and building over time. But anyways, I think we have reached the end here, so I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. This is one of my favorite topics, and I will definitely put out a couple more shows on it in the future. If you have any questions or comments, you can find me on Instagram at RealQuantumFit, my personal Facebook page, Taylor Kelson, or you can send me a voice message on Anchor if you listen to me on that app. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.